Welcome to Know, I'm Mica.
I'm Ben.
We knew the Switch was breaking records all over the place for Nintendo, resulting in one of the fastest selling consoles the company's ever produced, but apparently it's doing even better than people thought. And according to sources on the manufacturing side, the console's seen a huge bump in its recent supply.
Are Nintendo stock woes officially over? Will Switches finally be plentiful?
Meh.
Well, some analysts out there are disagreeing about what this means and whether or not Nintendo will be able to achieve some truly impressive stats by the time the system has been out on the market for 1 year.
But before we get into all of that, let's talk about the report itself. It comes from Digitimes, an outlet that covers, semiconductor, electronic, and production news for Taiwan and China, which super riveting and entertaining, we know, but occasionally it means they're privy to some interesting bits of information on the supply chain of things.
But according to some of their sources in the upstream supply chain, meaning the part of the supply chain that's more associated with raw material production rather than assembly, Nintendo has been able to raise the order of Switch units up to 2 million per month.
That would be a pretty significant bump for the company, who was only targeting to produce and sell 10 million Switches through the console's entire first year. And by the end of June, that number was already at around 5 million. So 2 million a month is probably more than double what they've been doing for the last couple of months.
It also says a lot about the demand for the Switch. When the console was first moving in vast quantities, there were plenty of naysayers out there who speculated that this was simply the early adopters, and that as time went on, the demand would peter out. However, we're a bit past that at this point.
Just a smidge.
And if this 2 million number is correct, we still haven't quite seen what the Switch is capable of moving just yet.
Dr. Circuitoto, a Nintendo insider and CEO of Tokyo-based game industry firm who is often consulted about business matters pertaining to Nintendo, weighed in on this news with his thoughts on Twitter, writing, "If true, it sells much, much better than many believe."
However, some other industry analysts have jumped in on the report as well, and they're not quite sure how much stock, no pun intended.
It was absolutely intended.
Okay, it was absolutely intended. They put in it. That's because the Digitimes report also goes on to claim that Nintendo is updating that 10 million target to somewhere around 20 million. And that part is where things sound a little bit like a stretch.
For starters, back in July, Nintendo told investors that despite those massive sales in the first few months, totaling around 5 million, they were still keeping the company guidance on the Switch at around 10 million units for the total fiscal year.
And most of that was due to production constraints that Nintendo's run into because of shortages of DRAM, and not because Nintendo decided they wanted to be jerks and keep them out of gamers' hands. Although if you ask Nintendo, they believe they've over-delivered on the Switch supply, so quit your bitching.
Oh, Nintendo. But anyway, back to the naysaying analysts who aren't buying this report, and specifically the sudden jump to 20 million units that Nintendo will magically be able to pull out of thin air. Video game analyst Daniel Ahmad responded to Toto's tweet saying he checked out after the projection of 20 million, writing, "Stopped reading right there. Digitimes is reliable sometimes, but for video game stuff, it's likely wrong."
And Ahmad has a point there. While Digitimes production sources have dropped some very good information in the past, for instance, all the way back in June of last year, they dropped some very specific and correct specs about the hardware itself, like the size of the Switch screen. Plus, they reported that it would be a handheld and console hybrid.
But they also reported earlier in 2016 that Nintendo was delaying the Switch, then known as the NX, to earlier 2017 to add, VR. They were totally off on that VR part, but right on the money about the delay from late 2016 to early 2017.
While they do have sources in some of these plants in the supply chain, it seems that the sources themselves aren't always going to have the most accurate information. In this case, it's plausible a source would have a pretty decent idea of the new number of units being produced, but maybe not quite all of the details on these true projections.
And on that front, Ahmad does agree that Nintendo is definitely making more Switches than they first projected, have indeed upped the supply in recent months. He followed up on Twitter by saying that whatever the case is, it's clear that production will increase for the holiday season. Nintendo will easily surpass its full fiscal year target.
So both analysts aren't quite in agreement that Nintendo will hit the 20 million, but both agree that it looks like they're going to hit more than 10 million because of upped production. And that lines up with what other analysts have been predicting for the system in general, with one firm recently nearly doubling their estimates of Switch sales in the next few years, up to 130 million by 2022.
All of that is definitely good news for Nintendo and eager holiday shoppers, especially as Nintendo heads into the final quarter of the year. They're already poised to have one of the big ticket items of the season, and that's, even before Super Mario Odyssey has even hit the console, which is in a few weeks. Is everybody ready? I know I'm not.
Oh god, it's already October.
I know!
Oh, just the right time to increase production. Good job, Nintendo. As for how much the production has increased, and whether or not they're going to bump up that projection of 10 million units, we should actually know that soon enough.
Their next investor briefing should be hitting sometime in the next few weeks, as September marked the end of another quarter. Well, maybe we'll see some of those sweet, sweet projections.
But really, Switches are what we really want. Just keep them moving, Nintendo. Come on.
What do you guys think of Nintendo's apparent production update? Too little, too late? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on Nintendo and the holiday season, remember to like this video, and if you're new around here, subscribe to the Know.
Dr. Circuitoto, a Nintendo Nintendo. But they also reported earlier in 2016 that the Nintendo Switch was
I can dream. I want Nintendo VR.
Crossing our fingers, which means that everybody at the opening ceremonies of the Olympics will have a Switch in their hands. Ooh. The fact that we were just at the end, right there, when it cut out, is such a slap in the face.
How destroyed is your spirit?